What the hell is Saw Sports or whatever that last call was talking about? What the hell is that?
Guys are from Free Love, man.
What's the motherfucking deal, man? Welcome to Saw Sports. We're going to get into the Week 4 matchup between the Panthers and the Texans. I am your host, Ed Honcho. If you're not familiar with Saw Sports is a Houston, Texas homer network. We're talking all sports, but only Houston. Make sure you follow Saw Sports on all the proper social medias below. Let's get into it. Let's stop wasting time. Let's get into the preview right now. So if we look at the record of both of these teams coming into 2019 Week 4, you have the Panthers coming in at 1-2 after having faced the Rams, the Bucks, and the Cardinals, finding success against the Cardinals with Kyle Allen. Then you have the Texans, who have had the Saints, the Jags, and also the Chargers. Now, I wouldn't say that either one of these schedules have been a murderous row the way things are looking right now, because the Jags game, the Texans fared by Foles getting hurt the first game and facing Gardner Minshew in his first game ever, and it was still too close for my comfort. Then you look at the lone win from the Panthers, which is the Cardinals game. Now, yes, they lost Cam Newton, and you saw a very good performance from Kyle Allen. But again, it's Arizona. It's kind of been the punching bag for everybody. That's where everybody's been putting them numbers. So I don't know if that gives you a good judge of who you're facing. But let's get into the two stars of the game. I guess you say the two guys who are going to be the field generals in Kyle Allen and Deshaun Watson. Let's get a comparison of those guys right now. So let's just take a minute to look at the quarterback comparison of the two guys who are going to be leading their teams into battle on Sunday. You got Kyle Allen, whose numbers are, I guess, I wouldn't say skewed, but again, only having one star, not expected to be the guy. A lot of us were looking forward to seeing Cam Newton, but kind of coming in on the offseason with some of the injuries and things, and now I believe has a Lisfranc injury he's battling. So it's going to be a little bit of a different lineup, going to be very interesting to see. So as you look here, you can see that Kyle Allen is 19 for 26, 73.1% completion, 261 yards, 4 touchdowns, no interceptions. So he basically has 2/3 of Watson's touchdowns in one game. And again, though, you have to take into account this was the Arizona Cardinals. So what are you really getting? And I believe last year he did have a game against the Saints, who were probably resting a lot of players. So you kind of saw him have a performance there, but may not have been, again, like, you just don't have a real judge of, is this guy starting material, is he a guy that can lead you into battle against a top-notch team. But then again, looking at Watson, you have him 61 of 93, 65.6% completion, 778 yards, 6 touchdowns, 1 interception. And you look at who he's faced. Again, you saw a very good Jags team, even though Bouye wasn't available. You saw a Saints team who was missing one of their better defensive players. And then you saw a Chargers team who was decent on defense, but you saw Deshaun able to put up a good chunk of yards, 350-plus yards. So, it's very interesting to see what's going on. It's going to be very interesting to see what Allen really brings to the table against a pretty much healthy Texans team for the most part. So we'll find out, is he the real deal? Is he just a placeholder, or what's really happening with him? And again, like I said, with the Texans, there is no excuse if they cannot get the victory over Kyle Allen. But let's go ahead and get into the other side of the ball, the defensive side of the ball, and look at some of the guys who are standing out for both teams as far as defensive production. Now we're talking about sack leaders. Guys are going to be able to put the pressure on these quarterbacks. And this is not saying these are the best defensive guys on each one of these teams, even though arguably right now Merciless is probably one of the best defensive players in the league right now. And you could argue that right now he is the best defensive player on the Texans, as Watt kind of started to come into his own. But, that's kind of one game right now. The odds are kind of against him. But I want to focus on sacks. Again, guys are going to put the pressure on quarterbacks. And I know y'all love the sack numbers so much, even though we could talk TFLs and a lot of other things. But for some reason, people love sacks, so we'll talk about that. You got Addison, you got Merciless. Madison comes in with 3.5 sacks and only 3 tackles. But you have Merciless, who is filling up the stat sheet with not only 4 sacks, 11 tackles, 3 forced fumbles, which has put the Texans in great position in a lot of these games that they have had wins, because Merciless has made great plays. And Merciless is the only player on the Texans with an INT. Nobody in the secondary has secured an interception. There have been a bunch of close but no cigars, a bunch of them that hit hands, but they just haven't been able to secure it. Merciless, being the only defensive player on the Texans with an interception, is good for him, but maybe not as good for the Texans secondary, but we'll get into that a little bit later. Let's kind of look at some of the other key names that will be contributing to this game that you need to watch out for. So now I kind of move into the running back position, and the Texans are kind of operating by tandem. I think the Panthers have a guy that is kind of all-encompassing, can hit you running the rock and also in the receiving game, and that is Christian McCaffrey. And we're going to talk about RB1 for the Texans, Carlos Hyde. So With McCaffrey, you have 59 yards, a 5.4 yard per carry clip, which is very nice. 318 yards, 3 touchdowns, 0 fumbles. Last game against Arizona, he had a 76-yard run for a touchdown, which means he can hit you with the home run play. And so he's a guy that can be very dangerous in multiple aspects of the field. And so the Texans are going to have to know where he is at all times. And we've seen some very dangerous backs this year, and they've had some relative success against the Texans. Now, they may not have been used as much as they should. I would say the Chargers game like Eckler, but that's to our benefit. But we saw Kamara do damage, more so in the second half of that game. But let's talk about Carlos Hyde, who's had 40 attempts at 4.8 yards per carry, which is not so bad, for himself, with 192 yards, 1 touchdown, 0 fumbles. So, again, both of these guys can do damage. Carlos Hyde just feel like his career has been renewed with the Texans. But again, he's working in tandem with Duke Johnson. And Duke Johnson is a guy who's a bit more of a threat in the passing game. Carlos Hyde is a guy who's kind of the better runner so far this season, in my opinion. But these are not the only guys on the offensive side of the ball that you're going to have to look out for. Let's take a look at pass catchers for both of these teams. So when we talk about receiving threats in this game, there's so many to mention, but we're going to focus on 2 of them. We're going to focus on guys who have been the most prolific so far this season for the teams. And we're talking about one who is arguably the best in the league, in my opinion, of course, the best in the league, and DeAndre Hopkins. And you have a young guy who's been here a couple of years, and DJ Moore, who's starting to make a little bit of a name for himself on the Panthers roster, along with Samuel. So if you look at both these guys, very few numbers that separate them. Hopkins with 19 receptions at 11 and a half yards per catch, and 218 yards with 2 touchdowns. You have DJ Moore right behind him, only 2 yards less, but averaging 12.8 yards per catch, only a yard shy of the same number as far as total yards, and only a touchdown shy of the same number in total yards. So again, both of these guys can see some success. And going up against this Texan secondary has been very almost breaking. You kind of hit it almost quite, and then somehow they managed to snap back in place at the last minute. DJ Moore could possibly see some success. There's going to be very interesting, because I believe it was Jackson lining up from on the opposite side of Hopkins. It's going to be extremely interesting to see how both of these guys fare, along with the additional weapons that both of these teams have in the passing game. But let's continue. So when it comes to the strengths and weaknesses of the Carolina Panthers, I think you have to take into account a few factors as to what's happened with them. Their overall NFL numbers are pretty good when you compare them against other teams, but then you got to compare it against the teams that they have played. I'm not very high on the Bucs, definitely not high on Arizona. The Rams, definitely a commendable team that it would be a bit of a challenge. So then you have to also look at the fact their quarterback situation. Would Kyle Allen playing the first couple of weeks, would that have been a plus instead of Cam Newton? Or would it have been a negative? How would it have impacted them? So I think with that situation, you don't really know who Carolina is with Kyle Allen, because again, Arizona is almost like a give me game at this point for a lot of teams. You see guys just kind of going in there walking over Arizona. It is what it is. But let's take a look at their numbers and where they compare, and then I'll kind of talk about where I think they can take advantage of the Texans. I'll talk about where I think the Texans can take advantage of them. Right now, putting up 26.3 points a game, 369.3 yards for 11th in the league, 256 passing yards for 13th in the league, and 113 rushing yards. So almost everything across the board offensively, they're in that top half of the league, a little higher than top half of the league. So that's commendable. But again, look at who you're going against. You're not really facing a real threat. Like I said, to me, in my opinion, the Rams game is the only real challenge. The others should have been relatively gimmies, but then you still take that loss to the Bucs. How much of that is on them? How much of that is Cam not being 100%? Again, so you really don't know what you would have gotten out of that game. Would it have been a better performance, or is this who they are? Now, you look at the defense, which is good for giving up 23 points a game, 295.3 yards a game, total yards a game, which is good for 4th in the league. Again, look at the competition, or is it that this defense is pretty damn good? 166.3 and then 129 rushing yards a game. And so I think where their strength lies, honestly, is going to be on the defensive side of the ball when it comes to stopping the Texans. As far as that offensive line, the Texans, I still am not 100% sold on them. They have some guys on their line who can make some plays. Kuechly is still one of the best in the game, one of the best to do it. So you have to respect him. Jackson is very interesting. He had 2 picks last game. So they'll be able to capitalize on any mistakes that are made on the offensive line. And if Deshaun is not 100% accurate, I think that they'll be able to make mistakes if receivers can't secure catches. They'll be able to capitalize on those things. But I do believe their weakness, as far as defensively, will be that the Texans have a solid running game, and if they stick to the running game, this week, they may be able to take advantage of the Panthers by, gashing them for big yards, here and there, and then, be able to kind of beat them over the top. So offensively, when it comes against this defense, for the Panthers, it's kind of a similar situation. They have some offensive line issues. I think Little's going to be in the lineup. They've had some injuries, so they're going to have some mixing and matching going on. And I think the Texans' front seven will be able to take advantage of that, be able to get pressure on Allen. Again, still a young guy with limited games under his belt, so he's going to be prone to make mistakes. And so I think the Texans' front seven can provide that additional pressure, and maybe the secondary can take advantage of it. But then we've seen week after week with this Texans secondary playing such soft coverage that even young guys, we saw Minshew, are able to take advantage. They've been targeting J-Joe. They've been able to capitalize on mistakes, finding holes in the zone. So if Allen, as good as he looked last week against Arizona, if they're giving him that kind of opening, then he may be able to take advantage of the Texans. So that's going to be very interesting to see what happens with that. But let's kind of talk about the Texans and addressing their strengths and weaknesses as a whole. So when it comes to addressing the Houston Texans' strengths and weaknesses versus this Panthers team, it's kind of interesting because I talked about the Panthers and their strength of competition and trying to figure out who they are. Well, the Texans have been relatively healthy, and I still don't feel like they have a real identity as to who they are. The offensive line changes every week. Again, going to be something to keep in consideration with who they end up starting this week and trying to get that line to gel, to mesh. The defense, even though, again, being pretty much healthy, has just been putting out questionable performances. Their numbers aren't great, and we're going to get into that especially. Let's start with the defense side of the ball, because the defense is giving up basically 21 points a game, giving up 385 yards a game, almost like 386, and almost 278 yards passing in the game. Yes, I'm rounding up. And then giving up 108 yards rushing. Again, so you go from a number one run-stopping defense to, halfway to the bottom of the league. And, well, we can talk about why that is. I think most of us know why that is. There's no point even getting into that now. But then you look at the offensive side of the ball, and then you say, hey, well, they're 14th in points. They're 17th in yards total. They're 21st in passing yards. And then they're 10th in rushing. So top 10 only in the rushing category, which, again, was a pleasant surprise after losing Lamar Miller early in the season. So my question is this, because I did a video earlier in the week, and I said, hey, are the Texans a top 10 team, right? And I said yes. But if you look at these numbers pretty much disagree in every category except rushing the ball. And that's something they got away from last week against the Chargers. And maybe those numbers might still be a little bit better, because I think they were 5 before the Chargers game, and then they dropped to about 5 spots to number 10 because they got away from it. But when you have a guy like Hyde, you have Watson's running ability, and then you have what Duke Johnson is able to bring to the game in the passing game, the running back situation is very interesting. But I want to talk about the strengths that I think they have versus Carolina, as I was just alluding to, will be the running game, because that's Carolina's weakest area. Again, you can talk about, well, look at the quarterbacks that Carolina's faced. You look at the competition that they faced. But you have a guy in Dante. Again, it's not easy to get interceptions. You have Dante Jackson, who I think had 2 picks last game. Arizona's not a big threat, and you can say, well, maybe the stats are skewed because that Arizona game, a lot of teams have been able to take advantage of that. Still, you see their weak point, even throughout all these games, has been the running game. So that's one of the Texans' strengths this year. Again, that's the only place where they are top 10. So I think the Texans need to leverage that into their advantage, and then hopefully they can open up the passing game from that. Defensively, I think that front seven has to take advantage, because the Panthers kind of have some similar issues as the Texans. I think the Texans line may be a little bit more consistent. The changes have been because of coaching decisions as opposed to injuries. I think they got Greg Little coming in, making his first start. So I think they have to take advantage of that. Hopefully Romeo Cornell can, put guys in position to exploit some of these inconsistencies in the Panthers' offensive line. And maybe that will turn into opportunities for the secondary, who is yet to get their first interception. Again, Whitney Mercer, the only Texan with an interception, only guy causing forceful. Whitney Mercer is a wrecking machine. That's the Texans' strength. I think Watson will have a solid game. I don't think this will be his best game of the season. Like I said, it's going to be very interesting testing those Panthers corners to see what they really are. But you have so many weapons that you should be able to find a weakness and exploit them one way or another. But again, I'm going to get into my prediction, what I really think the outcome of this game will be. Who has the bigger advantage? Is it the Texans? I'm going to be leaning towards the Texans because I'm biased, or do I truly think that the Panthers will win this game? And if you saw my prediction video in the beginning of the season, you saw the roundtable prediction video, y'all already know which way I was leaning. But some things have changed since that video. So when it comes to my prediction on this Panthers versus Texans team, I think there's a few factors that you have to look into it. Prior to the season, I picked the Texans to win. I picked it at this point in the season to be our first win. I thought Newton would still be playing. I knew that he had questionable issues with the shoulder and some other stuff going on, but obviously he's not playing. And so you're looking at Kyle Allen and you're wondering, well, who is this Kyle Allen kid? You saw him a little bit at the end of last year before I think he had a little bit of an injury. And then you saw him against Arizona looking pretty successful. Again, both of those situations were favorable situations for him because, again, it was a team who wasn't really playing their guys as they were looking towards the playoffs. And then you had a team who's just not that good. So, but not to talk shit because the Texans have one of the worst secondaries in the league. So I think that he's a guy that can exploit that. I'm not going to give my score predictions. I'm going to save that for the pregame show. Mark my motherfucking words. But I'm going to stick with my prediction that the Texans win, but I think it's going to be another game where it's too close for comfort. I don't think this will be the game where the Texans get their dominant victory yet. And what I mean by dominant victory is a 2-score or better win. And you've seen every one of these games with the Texans come down to a last-minute situation. I honestly feel like this will be another one of those last-minute type situations where the opposing team has the opportunity to score, but just a fortunate play being made by somebody on the defensive side of the ball, or maybe a mistake by somebody who on the opposing team, just a drop or whatever it is, prevents them from getting the go-ahead score. But I think it's going to be a turnover. That's just my personal opinion. I think that, Kyle's going to have a pretty good game, and I think he's going to have a turnover late and end up, losing the game for the Panthers. But again, closer than I like to say. I'll give my actual score prediction during the pregame show, so make sure you're there. We start an hour before the game. We do that for every game. So again, make sure you hit that subscribe button. Make sure you hit that like button. But stay tuned because we still have the comment of the day coming up next. So again, I appreciate you watching this preview, or my opinions on the Carolina versus Texans game that will be coming up on Sunday. Make sure you're following Sauce Sports on all the proper social medias listed down below. Make sure you hit the links in the descriptions to find out more about Sauce Sports, how you can become an active, fresh ingredient. Just hit that subscribe button. It's pretty much that simple. Make sure you follow, like I said, on social media. Make sure you become a part of the Facebook group. Make sure you join. Make sure you like, subscribe, tell a friend, all those good things. But let's get into the comment of the day right now. I appreciate you watching. It's your boy, Honcho. Y'all be cool like y'all be cool, but most of all, y'all stay saucy, and I will catch y'all next time. So, as we get into the comment of the day, this one comes from Dre D in reference to the last video I did about the 5 keys to watch of the Texans versus the Carolina Panthers. And that is, Kenny Stills also threw the block that allowed Jordan Akins to score a TD. I was talking about how Kenny Stills has been a contributing factor. He's had a 30-plus yard play every game since he's been here. And yes, on that play, he did throw a great block, looking like a young Kevin Walters. So shout out to Kenny Stills and everything that he's done so far, and hopefully he can continue to have a great season with the Texans. Shout out to Dre D for being the comment of the day. Still, y'all giving a lot of good suggestions for the name of this segment. I'm going to try to pick something by the start of next week. I'm just looking for something that hits. Some of them have been real good. I'm going to figure it out. But with that being said, y'all be cool like y'all be cool. It's your boy and Honcho, man. Most of all, y'all stay saucy. Until next time, I'm out.
Perfect.